Hi, we're going to have a look at how to multiply fractions. And I think sometimes when we have fractions and we see multiplication, we kind of freak out. And I don't think you need to, because actually multiplying fractions, it's actually easier than adding or subtracting fractions. And so we're going to follow these 4 steps every single time, and it will ensure us a correct answer every single time. So our first step, we're going to convert any we're going to convert any fractions that we have to improper fractions if we have some mixed numbers. Step number 2, we're going to multiply the numerators. That's our top values. Step number 3, we're going to multiply the denominators. That will be our bottom values. And step number 4 will be to simplify the fraction if it is necessary. So the first thing we're going to do here is we are going to convert to improper fractions. So let's have a look here. 5/3 is already an improper fraction. And 4/7 is just a normal fraction. We don't have any mixed numbers, so what we're going to do is we're going to hop right to step number 2. And we're going to look at the top numbers. Those are our numerators. So we're going to do top times tops. If we had 3 fractions, we do tops times tops times tops. Okay, so there's my multiplication of my numerators. And then we're going to go to step 3, multiply the denominators. So I've got my bottom numbers, 3 times 7. And we're going to multiply these numbers down there. Okay, so once I do that, I have my 5 times 4, which is equal to a 20. And my denominator is 3 times 7, which is equal to 21. Now, step number 4 suggests simplifying the fraction if necessary. So if we had some common numbers in here, for example, 20, we could divide 20 by a 2 or a 5 or a 4. But 21 does not have a 2. You can't divide 21 by 2 or 5 or 4. So this is as simple as it will get. For a second example, we're going to look at 3 multiplications, and notice that this example here, it's not in a fraction. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow our 4 steps again, but before we do, we're going to rewrite 3 as a fraction. And the way you rewrite a whole number as a fraction is by putting it with the denominator of 1. So we're going to look and see, do we have any mixed numbers here? No. So all of our fractions are already improper fractions. So we're going to rewrite it. We have a 2/5 times a 4/7 times a 3/1. And the rule again is tops times tops and bottoms times bottoms. So step number 2, you're going to multiply all the numerators. That's all your top numbers. Okay, so we're going to have a 2, a times a 4, a times a 3. And all of my denominators for step 3 are going to be 5 times 7 times 1. Okay, so then if we multiply these along, a 2 times a 4 is an 8 times a 3 gives us a numerator of 24. And in the denominator, we have a 5 times a 7 times a 1, which is a 35. And again, let's look at step number 4. Can we simplify this fraction? In the numerator, I have a 24, and that can be divided by a 2. It can be divided by a 4, a 6, an 8, a 12. But in the denominator, I have a 35, and 35 can only be divided by a 5 and a 7 and a 1 and a 35. So since none of them have numbers in common, this is as low as the fraction will go. It is simplified as far as it will go. Here's a third example that we're going to just quickly take a look at here. Notice in this example that we have 2 mixed numbers. We have a 2 and 1/4, and we have a 4 and 3/5. So the first thing we want to do is we want to convert to improper fractions. So remember what we do there. We're going to take the 4. Let me just put this right here. We've got a 2 and a 1/4. And we're going to multiply that by a 4 and a 3/5. Okay, so to convert to improper fractions, the trick is you take the bottom and you multiply it by the whole number. You take the bottom, your denominator, and you multiply it by the whole number, and then you're going to add it to the numerator. Okay, so here we go. We're going to take the bottom, which is 4. We're going to multiply it by the whole number, which is 2. That's 8. So that means I've got 8 whole pieces plus 1 more, which is 9/4. That's my improper fraction. Okay, so let's have a look over here. I'm going to take my 5 and multiply it by the 4, and that gives me 20. I've got 20 pieces plus 3 more. So I've got 23/5. Okay, and now we're going to go and do our steps again. Multiply the numerators and multiply the denominators. Okay, so let me put our division bar here. 9 times 23 goes in the upstairs, and that's going to be a nice big number. And 4 times 5 goes in the downstairs. So remember, it's tops times tops, bottoms times bottoms. And 9 times 23 is 207. And 4 times 5 is 20. So my final answer is 207 divided by 20. And looking back over here, I have a 9 and a 4, and none of those can be simplified. A 23 and a 5, and neither of those can be simplified. So that lets you know that even the 9 and the 5 and the 23 and the 4, none of these can be simplified. So you know that your answer here will be in its completely simplified form, and you don't need to simplify it any further. I just wanted to show an example of what will happen if you needed to simplify. So here's one last example here. And remember, it's tops times tops when you're multiplying your fractions. And we have 2 in the top and 3 in the top. Okay, and then it's bottoms times bottoms. And that's 5 times 8 in the denominator. Okay. And a couple things you can do. You can cross cancel right here. Like you can see, oh, there's a 2 and an 8, which would make it a 1 and a 4. You can do that. Or you can actually multiply straight through. Let me get rid of that. And cancel at the end, which is sometimes easy as well for some people. So 2 times 3, and I get a 6 in the numerator, 5 times 8, and I have a 40 in the denominator. And looking quickly at these numbers, because they're both even numbers, I know they're divisible by 2. So I can divide this number by 2 and divide this number by 2, and I end up with a 3 in the numerator and a 20 in the denominator. So if you notice that you can cancel, look for even numbers. If they're even, they're divisible by 2. Okay, so if they're even numbers, they're divisible by 2. And look for numbers ending in 5. If they end in a 5 or a 0, you know immediately that you can simplify them by 5s.